Please lie on your back and allow your legs to lengthen if you can, and notice for a few moments the contact of your body with the floor. Notice the length of your skeleton from the heel up to your head, along the left side of your leg, the left leg into your pelvis, along the spine on the left side to your head, and feel the length on the right side from the right heel along the right leg, over the right buttock, along the right side of the spine into your head. And notice how these two lines on the left and right side interact with the floor. Where do these lines seem to go along the floor and touch the floor, and where are these lines not in contact with the floor? And maybe the reading on the right and the left side is not the same. Notice the weight of the two buttocks. Maybe one buttock feels a bit heavier. Maybe one buttock lies a bit more clearly. And also pay particular attention to the space in your belt area, in your lower back area. What is happening there? How big is the gap there between your body and the floor? How big is the gap when you move from the spine sideways? And again, you may find that the left and right side doesn't produce exactly the same reading. And that's okay. Don't try and correct it, just notice it. And please now bend your legs. Stand your feet in a comfortable distance from your pelvis, hip width apart. Your knees pointing to the ceiling. And start rolling your pelvis now, so that once you roll it in the direction of your head and your lower back flattens a bit, and once you roll the pelvis in the direction of your feet, and that produces an arch, a hollow, a lifting of the spine in your lower back. And if you're not quite clear what you're doing, it's okay to hold your pelvis, to hold your hip bones, and monitor with your hands the movement. Support with your hands the movement, as if you're holding the steering wheel of your own body and telling it in which direction it should move. Make sure you're breathing and follow the movement of the spine that is being produced by the movement of the pelvis right along into your head, so that you may begin to feel the back of the head moving, rolling on the floor, and your chin nodding gently, coming down once towards your chest, and then when your back flattens, being pushed away from the chest again. And leave it for a moment. You're going to be introduced now to a concept that Feldenkrais uses a lot in various circumstances, and that once when you understand it, you can apply to other parts of your body with equal success. And the concept is the idea of a clock. Not a digital clock, but the old-fashioned round clock that has got all the hours signed up, and your pelvis is at the moment lying on such a clock. And depending on how you move your pelvis, you're touching different hours. So I want you again to roll your pelvis like you've just been doing it. So once you actually flatten your back and once you hollow your back. And when you are flattening your back, that's where you touch 6 o'clock. When you are rolling the pelvis downwards and your tailbone is near the floor, that's where you have 12 o'clock. So carry on rolling the pelvis and try and picture and see that unfinished clock face. Once, when you flatten your back, you touch 6 o'clock. When you go in the opposite direction, you touch 12 o'clock. Notice how big your clock is at the moment. Make 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock equal distance from the center, so that when we begin to build up the clock, it is a perfect circle. And if one direction seems to be a bit smaller, then adjust the bigger one to the smaller one. Okay. And please leave it alone for a moment. And now start rolling your pelvis from side to side. Do it in such a way that your knees more or less stay facing the ceiling. Which means that when you roll to the right, you have to lean a bit more on your left foot. When you roll to the left, you lean a bit more on the right foot. And as you roll from side to side, establish for you where 9 o'clock is and where 3 o'clock is. 9 o'clock is when you roll to the left. 3 o'clock is when you roll to the right. So you are now moving between 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, checking the circumference of the clock face in that direction. Make sure 3 and 9 o'clock are equal distance from the center. Notice your breathing. And whatever else wants to participate in this movement, along the rib cage, along the spine, further towards your head, let it participate without actually doing something active. Okay. And leave it alone. If you want to, lengthen your legs and rest for a moment. And remember, near your tailbone, you have 12 o'clock. Towards your right hip, you have 3 o'clock. In the small of your back, you have 6 o'clock. And towards your left hip, you have 9 o'clock. And we are going to build up the whole clock with all the 12 hours, bit by bit. So please bend your legs again. And go to 12 o'clock, which means you hollow your lower back and you allow the tailbone to come closer towards the floor. And from there now, start moving towards your right a bit. Try and find 1 o'clock for you, and 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. And then go back again, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And do that many times, this quarter circle in the lower right half of your pelvis. But do it in such a way that you know at what hour you are. 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Allow your left foot to help. Make sure your belly stays soft so that it can be busy with breathing. And when you have built up the picture, scan further afield for echoes of this movement. For instance, what's happening with your head. Okay. And don't make the return journey just one big sweeping movement. Also count the hours on the return. And then when you're ready, leave it alone for a moment and allow yourself to rest again. With your legs long or your legs bent, whatever you prefer. And then draw your legs up again. And go now straight away to 3 o'clock on the right side. And from 3 o'clock, go and find 4 o'clock of this clock with your pelvis. Find 5 o'clock and find 6 o'clock, which is when your lower back is flattened against the floor, and then go back to 5, 4 and 3. And begin to develop and become familiar with this quarter circle in the right upper half of your pelvis. Maybe it's easier for you to think that the hours are lying there and you go and visit them, you touch them, or you could think that you're printing them. Every time there's a touching of an hour, that's when the hour goes down onto the floor. From 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 and back again. And you may find that some of these hours are easier to reach, to touch than others. Don't force anything. If 1 hour feels a bit difficult to touch, then allow all the other hours to come clear near to the center. In other words, make the clock smaller. Make it as small as the most difficult hour to touch demands. So that what you put in your brain as a sensory input is regularity, perfection, precision, and democracy again in terms that's all the same, right? Not one big, one small. Nice. Okay. And from 6 o'clock, travel all the way down to 12 o'clock via 3 o'clock. So from flattening your back, travel down all the way back. Beautiful. And up again. So you end up printing out a semicircle on the right side of your pelvis. And again, notice where you feel that in your body. Notice it in your head maybe. And leave it alone. Allow your legs to lengthen. And what is the after effect of having done these few movements so far? In other words, is there a difference on the left and right side of your body? In the pelvic area? In the way your lower back is contacting the floor? Or maybe again in that length from the right heel up towards your head, as compared to the left heel, the line going up towards the head on the left side of the spine. Maybe the two buttocks feel different. And please bend your legs again. And for a moment, leave your pelvis in this neutral position. And just think of the remaining hours. Where are they going to be? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And of course, they're going to be on the left side. And see what feeling you have, what you're anticipating, what you think you will expect or feel as you're going to travel over to that side. Do you think it will be easier for you or clearer? Or do you have a feeling that this is going to be more difficult for you? So let's see what happens. Go to 6 o'clock which is your lower back is flattened. And now begin to rely more on your right foot, so your pelvis is allowed to begin to roll towards your left to find 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And from there go backwards again to 8 and 7 and 6. And so do that a few times so your body gets used to shifting the weight in that way over on the left side. Notice the size of your clock on that side. Do you feel you're making a bigger movement or a smaller movement? And do at the moment whatever feels comfortable and whatever helps you to clarify the picture. And allow the head to respond. Good. And leave it alone. This clock has a neutral point, which of course clocks don't normally have. So you can stop time again and rest. And you are going to describe now a semicircle in the upper half of the pelvis. So with this clock, the wonderful thing is that you can do anything, jump around, combine hours in an unusual way. So please go to 3 o'clock again, which is on the right side. And from 3 o'clock, move again to 4 and 5 and 6 to 7 and 8 and 9 and back again over 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 to 3 o'clock. And begin to compare the quarter of an hour on the left with the quarter of an hour on the right. And whichever seems the more vulnerable, the more hesitant, that's the one that determines the size of the semicircle. Don't force the one that is difficult to become bigger. Make the one that has it easy adapt to the other one. And for a few moments forget about the individual hours, just enjoy the feeling of the pelvis making this generous semicircle on the floor, and notice how the movement of the pelvis brings articulation and life and shift in position all along your skeleton, into your ribs, along the spine, into your neck, into your head. And maybe your shoulder blades even feel something. Notice the lower back all the time having a wonderful input of contact with the floor. Okay. And leave it alone. Allow your legs to lengthen and rest for a moment. And what has this movement done to further any change in the interaction between your lower back and the floor? In your sensing of your own length? In the way your whole spine is lying? So there is 1/4 of an hour left before we have the full clock face painted, touched upon. Bend your legs and go to 9 o'clock on the left side. And now find 10 and 11 and 12 o'clock. And then, as before, go backwards, go over this same movement several times as if to make an impression on the floor, a groove in which you are going to roll easily and comfortably. And if any of these hours differ in quality from the previous ones, then just acknowledge that. There's no need to force anything. There's only a need to be aware of what is happening at the moment. Be gentle with yourself. Make sure you can breathe at every hour that you touch. Could you also rest at every hour? Or are there hours or gaps between the hours where you feel you have to rush? Okay, go to 9 o'clock and from there go down to 12, 10, 11, 12, and then across to 1, 2, 3 on the right side, and back again from 3 down to 12 to 9. In other words, start drawing a semicircle in the lower part of your pelvis. Allow the lower back a generous arching, but an arching that is all the time in motion, changing, shifting. So the muscles are busy and they have something to do, and normally a muscle that allows movement is a muscle that is quite happy. Allow your belly to be generous and big, to come forward without you pushing it forward. Don't hold it in. And notice how your chin gets pulled down to the chest. And any difference between left and right, through the repetition, you can level out. Any unevenness, any jerkiness, it's like ironing. You just go over the same thing again and again till the crease disappears, softly and gently. And when you feel that you want to stop, then stop the movement. And again allow your legs to lengthen and leave it all alone for a few moments. Start the initial movement again, where you just move straight up and down between 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock, rolling the pelvis in the direction of the head, in the direction of the feet. Notice the quality of this movement. Has anything become clearer or freer? More generous? And then stay at 12 o'clock, please. That means you hollow your lower back and start going backwards from 12 to 11 to 10 and so on up to 6 o'clock, and then back from 6 down to 12 again, so that you have the last of the semicircles printed out against the floor. And you give yourself a chance to change the contact of your pelvis and lower back with the floor on the left side many times. Keep your feet firmly planted on the floor to have good support. And again acknowledge the movement going through the body, along the spine, into your head. Okay, and then rest. Keep your legs bent and rest in a central position, that neutral point that real clocks don't have. And try and see the clock now with your eyes, with your inner eyes. How big is it at the moment? Is it the size of your watch dial? Is it like a church tower clock? Is it like a clock on the mantelpiece? And go to 12 o'clock and make the smallest clock that you can make whilst you're still being precise. From 12 to 1 to 3, go round clockwise and make it as small as you can make it, but be precise, count your hours. In your mind, know at any time where you are with your pelvis. And go round several times, a small clock. Is the small clock still producing a movement in your head? Articulation in your rib cage? Small doesn't mean that certain parts of the body shut down. It just means that everything is overall small. And now choose a bigger circumference. Go to the mantelpiece clock and make it a bit bigger. But don't ignore any of the hours. Stay with the hours. Count them, see them, feel them. And now think of a church tower clock and go even bigger. And church towers, some have smaller clocks and some have bigger clocks. Notice how the pressure changes under your feet in a circular fashion. And the head is beginning to mimic more and more what is happening underneath the pelvis. Good. Nice. And let it be. Stop at any hour you want to stop. You don't have to complete the circle. Allow your legs to lengthen. Notice how you're lying. Would you call your present lying restful? Can your legs rest? Is your lower back area resting? Are your shoulders relaxed? And is the way your head is lying comfortable? Please bend your legs again. And now go round the clock a few times in the anti-clock direction. So start at 12 o'clock and go 11, 10, 9. That means towards the left. And go round this way. And make it again, make it pleasant. Make it fun. And begin to involve your head a bit more now, so that you feel the back of the head is actually following a clock face too, a smaller clock face. So you have to allow the head to turn a bit left and right, because that is not as urgent as the 12, 6 o'clock motion. So add a bit of your own intuition and initiative. So your nose, as regards to the ceiling, is drawing circles, and the back of the head is printing out the clock, imitating the clock that Big Brother pelvis is printing out. Okay. And let it be, and please now lengthen one leg, whichever. Just lengthen one leg. Notice the heel of that foot, the leg that you've lengthened on the floor. And think now that the heel as well is lying on a little, tiny little clock face, or is going to print out the little clock face. Start again with the pelvis at 12 o'clock. And start going round the clock softly and generously and easily. And notice how the pressure on your heel of the long leg changes. So begin to involve that heel and foot a bit more actively in drawing out the clock face. Notice how your toes roll left and right, point downwards, begin to point more towards your face. Allow your head to be involved, so that you could say you are actually doing 3 major clocks. The big one underneath the pelvis, the smaller one behind your head, and an even smaller one behind your heel. And change the direction. So go anti-clockwise. What's happening with the kneecap of that long leg? There's also something going on that resembles a clock. And stop the movement, lengthen the other leg as well, and notice the 2 legs. The lines from that heel that has been doing the clock face up into your head, and the line from the heel that has not done the clock face, traveling along your body alongside the spine to your head. And now keep both your legs long. And again start the clock with the pelvis. Go to 12 o'clock. And don't worry too much. Don't worry anyway. Don't be too concerned about precision now. Keep the quarter of an hour in your mind and make a big generous movement with the pelvis. You may find it's a bit different now. Both your legs are long. And involve both your heels and the back of the head. So let your feet roll left and right, pointing downwards, flexing. That means the feet, the toes come closer towards your face. And make the foot movement a bit more active. Allow the heels to support the pelvis a bit more. Allow the heels to support the head. Allow the head to support the heels. And change the direction. And make it a bit quicker. Make it light, light and quick. Go fast. Never mind what's going on. And then slow it all down again and come to a stop. And once more, please bend your legs and allow your knees to flop sideways so that the sole of your feet face one another. They don't have to touch, but they face one another and your knees flop outwards. Anyone whose lower back is uncomfortable with that, please don't do it, or do it just for a very short time. And first of all, find the movement again between 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So allow the pelvis to roll in one direction and the other direction. Allow your head to respond and allow your knees to respond too. So when you go to 12 o'clock, your knees widen. Go closer to floor, left and right side. When you go to 6 o'clock, your knees are being pulled up a bit and the gap between them closes. Okay. And then go from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Which means now once one knee gets closer to the floor and then the other knee gets closer to the floor, allow the weight of the knee to help the pelvis roll. Notice your ribs following through the movement. Notice how the whole spine has to articulate, has to let the pelvis get on with its business. If your ribs hold the spine, then the pelvis has very little choice but to do only a tiny, tiny movement. Okay, and see if you can actually go round the whole clock in this position. Go to 12 o'clock and from there start a generous, easy, comfortable, pleasurable movement around, and allow the head to support the pelvis a bit. So be a bit more active with your head. Take the head into the picture. Could the head help the pelvis to roll? And change the direction. And make it once more slow, as precise as you can, addressing each hour, noticing your attitude to each hour in terms of your breathing, in terms of liking it, tolerating it, being able to do it. And do you detect any hour in this position that is not so easy to touch? There's no need to correct. The first thing is to take stock. Okay. And please stand your feet up again. So bring your knees to the ceiling, bring your feet to standing. Rest like this for a moment. And once more in this position, go round the clock, addressing each hour, and notice what size of clock you choose when you have not been asked to choose a specific size. Is it your watch dial size? Is it the mantelpiece size, the sitting room clock, or is it the church tower? Which size for you makes the movement most precise and pleasurable? And that's the size with which you work, and from there you can branch out into other sizes, making the movement bigger, making the movement smaller. Please also change the direction of your clock. Notice your breathing. Okay. Now if you have a sock handy, or two, or if you have a soft ball handy, then just have fun with it by taking the ball, small soft ball or a sock, and put that sock under your sacrum or that ball under your sacrum. The hard part of the pelvis behind. So you are a bit elevated. The size of the sock or the size of the ball that you put there determines the size of the clock. And go round the clock a few more times, round the outskirt of that little thing that you put behind you. And depending on what you have found, what you put there, you may actually find that it's a very small clock or a bigger clock. And just notice that maybe the pelvis can roll a bit more freely because there's an elevation, and you can really roll round the outside, bring the pelvis to touch on the outside of that ball or that sock. Make it a pleasurable, pleasing experience. Change the direction. Notice your breathing. Okay. and leave it alone. Take whatever you have put there out again. Lengthen your legs and notice once more the contact with the floor. Your buttocks, the lower back, along the spine, into the shoulder and the neck. And you can of course have fun finding this pelvic clock whilst you're sitting, whilst you're lying on your stomach, even whilst you're standing. But for the moment, leave it all alone, and in your own time find your way to standing. Stand for a few moments and notice what it feels like living in a body that has been going round the pelvic clock.